On what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her sister's life, the tension in the room was almost impossible to ignore. Cameras rolled. Guests whispered. And as the doors opened, all eyes turned toward one woman whose presence alone changed the entire atmosphere. Tammy Slaton had arrived. For fans of 1,000 pounds, sisters, family gatherings are never just celebrations, they are pressure cookers. Years of emotional history, public struggles with weight loss, deeply personal heartbreak, and sibling rivalry have played out in front of millions. But this moment felt different. This wasn't a routine family dinner. This was Amy Slaton's wedding to Brian, a milestone event meant to symbolize new beginnings. And yet, when Tammy walked in, viewers could feel something shift. Was it unresolved tension? Lingering resentment? Protective instinct? Or simply the weight of a complicated bond between two sisters who have grown up together, fought together, nearly lost each other, and somehow survived it all? Tonight, we take you inside that moment. What really happened, why it matters, how fans reacted, and what this could mean for the future of one of reality television's most emotionally raw families. Because sometimes, the most powerful drama isn't scripted. It's family. And this one was anything but simple. Background and context. To understand why Tammy's arrival carried so much emotional gravity, you have to understand the journey that brought the Slaton sisters to this point. 1,000 pounds. Sisters premiered in 2020, introducing America to sisters Amy and Tammy Slaton from Dixon, Kentucky. At the time, their combined weight exceeded 1,000 pounds. What began as a show centered on bariatric surgery and health transformation quickly evolved into something far deeper, a portrait of family trauma, codependency, resilience, and survival in rural America. Amy Slaton was often portrayed as the more motivated of the two in the early seasons. Determined to qualify for weight loss surgery so she could start a family, she pushed herself physically and emotionally. Viewers watched her undergo bariatric surgery, get married, and eventually welcome children, milestones that symbolized progress not just physically, but emotionally. Tammy's journey was more turbulent. Struggling with severe obesity, mental health challenges, and a series of controversial relationships, Tammy's health declined dramatically in the early seasons. There were hospitalizations. There were frightening setbacks. There were moments when even her own family questioned whether she would survive. In 2022, Tammy entered a rehabilitation facility for food addiction and weight management. According to confirmed reports and on-camera documentation, she remained in treatment for over a year. During that time, she underwent bariatric surgery and made significant progress in her weight loss journey. Her physical transformation shocked viewers, but what stood out even more was her emotional growth. She appeared calmer, more reflective, less combative. For many fans, Tammy's comeback arc became one of the most powerful redemption stories in reality television. Meanwhile, Amy's life was shifting in complicated ways. After welcoming children with her husband Michael Halterman, cracks began to show in their relationship. Publicly documented marital strain led to a divorce filing in 2023. The split was messy, emotional, and widely discussed among fans. Amy faced criticism, sympathy, and intense online speculation. So when news broke that Amy had found love again, this time with a man named Brian, viewers were curious. Who is he? How serious was the relationship? And perhaps most importantly, how did Tammy feel about it? Because if history has shown us anything, it's this: Tammy and Amy's relationship has always been layered with love, jealousy, loyalty, and raw honesty. Which brings us to the wedding. Breaking details. The wedding episode unfolded with the kind of anticipatory tension that reality producers dream of, but that families often dread. Amy, visibly emotional and hopeful, prepared for her ceremony with a mixture of nerves and excitement. According to the footage shown, Brian appeared supportive and eager, presenting himself as a stabilizing presence in Amy's life during a transitional period. But from the earliest scenes, there were hints that not everyone was fully at ease. Reports from the episode indicate that Tammy was initially hesitant about aspects of the relationship. While not overtly hostile, her body language and tone suggested caution. It's important to emphasize that what viewers see is edited for narrative impact, but even within that framework, the emotional undercurrent was unmistakable. When Tammy arrived at the wedding venue, the camera lingered. The music softened. Conversations quieted. Amy's face flickered, a mixture of relief and apprehension. For longtime fans, this was more than a sister attending a wedding. This was a test of growth, a moment of reckoning. Would Tammy embrace Amy's new chapter wholeheartedly? Or would unresolved history resurface at the worst possible time? There was no explosive confrontation, no dramatic shouting match. Instead, the tension was subtle, almost heavier because of it. Tammy offered congratulations. She maintained composure. But in interviews conducted separately, she expressed concerns. According to her on-camera commentary, she wanted Amy to be happy, but she also worried about whether Amy was moving too quickly after her divorce. And that sentiment resonated with many viewers. Because weddings symbolize permanence, stability, commitment, and Amy's recent past had been anything but stable. Expert analysis. From a psychological standpoint, family therapists often point out that sibling relationships formed under shared trauma, including poverty, health struggles, and parental instability, can become deeply intertwined. When one sibling makes a major life decision, the other may experience it as both a celebration and a threat to equilibrium. Dr. Lisa D'Amour, a clinical psychologist who has spoken broadly about family dynamics in media interviews, has explained that when adults grow up closely bonded through adversity, change can trigger anxiety, even if intentions are positive. Tammy and Amy's relationship fits many of those patterns. Legally, Amy's divorce and remarriage timeline is relevant. Public records confirm her separation and subsequent filing in 2023. While there is no evidence of legal wrongdoing or overlap, the rapid transition between relationships can raise emotional concerns within families, especially when children are involved. Politically, there's no direct angle here. But culturally, the Slaton sisters represent something uniquely American, working-class reality television that doesn't sanitize hardship. Their authenticity, unfiltered accents, financial struggles, health crises, has created a loyal audience that feels personally invested. Financially, weddings on reality television can impact ratings significantly. Episodes featuring milestone events often spike viewership. TLC has not publicly released detailed ratings breakdowns for this specific episode, but historically, major life events on the show generate increased social engagement. And engagement was immediate. Social media explosion. Within minutes of the episode airing, hashtags related to 1,000 pounds sisters began trending across platforms like X and TikTok. Some viewers defended Tammy, praising her maturity and composure. Others accused her of seeming judgmental or emotionally distant. One recurring theme among fans was relief. Relief that the wedding didn't devolve into chaos. Longtime viewers have grown accustomed to emotional blow-ups, so the absence of dramatic confrontation felt like growth. But there was also debate about Brian. Who is he, really? Is he prepared for the spotlight? Can he handle the complexities of marrying into a family that lives so publicly? Speculation spread quickly, though it's important to separate verified facts from online rumor. As of confirmed reporting, there are no publicly substantiated allegations against Brian. Much of the social chatter reflects viewer perception rather than documented evidence. Still, perception matters in reality television. And in the court of public opinion, moments of hesitation can spark weeks of conversation. What this means for the future. The Slaton sisters brand is built on transformation. Physical transformation. Emotional transformation. Relational transformation. Tammy's journey from near-fatal health crises to relative stability has been extraordinary. Amy's transition from first marriage to second represents another turning point. If the wedding marks a fresh chapter for Amy, it also redefines her dynamic with Tammy. Will Tammy step into a more supportive, advisory role? Will sibling rivalry reemerge? Will Brian become a stabilizing influence or a point of future conflict? Reality television thrives on tension, but sustainable storytelling requires evolution. Audiences want growth. They want redemption arcs. They want healing. If Tammy's composed presence at the wedding is any indication, producers may lean into a narrative of maturity rather than meltdown. But nothing in this family has ever been predictable. Emotional human angle. At its core, this story isn't about ratings or editing. It's about two sisters who have nearly lost each other to health crises, to addiction, to emotional exhaustion, standing in the same room at a pivotal life moment. Tammy has faced mortality in ways most people her age never have. Amy has navigated motherhood under the glare of national television. When Tammy walked into that wedding venue, she wasn't just a cast member entering a scene. She was a sister who once depended on Amy for survival. And Amy, standing in a wedding dress after a painful divorce, wasn't just a bride. She was a woman trying, once again, to build stability for herself and her children. That's why viewers care. Because beneath the reality TV framework, the Slaton story mirrors something deeply relatable. Family is messy. Change is hard. And love doesn't erase history. It coexists with it. Strong call to action. If you've followed Amy and Tammy's journey from the very first episode of 1,000 Pounds Sisters, you know this family never gives us simple moments. So what did you see in that wedding scene? Growth? Doubt? Protective instinct? Something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not just hot takes, but real perspective. Do you think Tammy has truly turned a corner? Do you believe Amy has found lasting stability with Brian? If you value deep, fact-based breakdowns of the stories behind reality television, the context, the psychology, the cultural impact, make sure you subscribe. Because we don't just recap headlines here. We investigate the human story behind them. And in this family, the next chapter is always just one episode away. If you watched closely, it wasn't what Tammy said at the wedding that stood out. It was what she didn't say. Reality television has trained audiences to expect explosions, tears thrown like grenades, shouting matches, dramatic walkouts. That didn't happen here. Instead, viewers witnessed something quieter, and in many ways, more powerful: restraint. For longtime fans of 1,000 Pounds Sisters, silence between Tammy and Amy has historically meant one of two things: either a storm is coming, or growth has finally taken root. And that ambiguity is exactly what made this episode so compelling. Tammy's body language told its own story. She appeared composed, measured, almost guarded. When she congratulated Amy, her tone was steady. But in her private interview segments, she admitted she had concerns. Not hostility, not bitterness. Concern. She questioned whether Amy had fully healed from her divorce before stepping into another marriage. She wondered whether the pace of the relationship was healthy. And perhaps most tellingly, she acknowledged that she didn't want to see her sister hurt again. That distinction matters. Because in earlier seasons, Tammy's resistance often felt reactive, defensive, even resentful. This time, it felt protective. And for viewers who have watched these sisters claw their way through years of trauma, that shift was impossible to ignore. The history that shaped this moment. To understand why Tammy's caution resonated, you have to revisit the foundation of their bond. Amy and Tammy grew up in financial instability in rural Kentucky. They've openly discussed childhood hardship, bullying, and complicated family dynamics. Their shared struggle with obesity wasn't just about food. It was intertwined with coping mechanisms, emotional survival, and dependency. When 1,000 Pounds Sisters debuted, Amy was often framed as the motivator. Tammy relied heavily on her, not only for emotional support but for daily living assistance. That dynamic created tension. Amy wanted independence. Tammy feared abandonment. Over time, that push and pull became one of the show's defining storylines. When Amy married Michael Halterman, Tammy struggled with the shift. She voiced fears about being left behind. She questioned Amy's priorities. At times, her reactions felt harsh, but underneath was something more vulnerable, fear of losing her closest ally. Fast forward to Amy's divorce. Suddenly, stability evaporated. Public court filings confirmed their separation in 2023, and the breakup unfolded under intense scrutiny. Amy navigated single motherhood, legal stress, and emotional fallout, all while cameras documented her every move. During that same period, Tammy was undergoing her own transformation in rehab, eventually receiving bariatric surgery and returning home dramatically lighter, both physically and, by many accounts, emotionally. The power balance shifted. Tammy, once the sister in crisis, began showing signs of self-sufficiency. Amy, once the stable one, appeared vulnerable. That reversal adds a profound layer to the wedding scene. Because Tammy wasn't walking in as the dependent sibling anymore. She was walking in as someone who had nearly died, fought her way back, and learned painful lessons about impulsivity, relationships, and survival. Who is Brian, and why the questions? Brian's presence at the center of this milestone inevitably drew attention. As with any new partner entering a reality television family, scrutiny is immediate and intense. Publicly available information confirms that Amy and Brian began dating after her separation. There has been no verified evidence of misconduct or controversy tied to him in mainstream reporting. However, viewers have questioned how quickly the relationship progressed toward marriage. And timing is often the silent third character in these stories. Amy's divorce was still relatively recent in the broader arc of her life. She has 2 young children. Emotional recovery after a marriage ends can be complex and nonlinear. Family members, especially protective siblings, naturally worry. Tammy articulated that worry in a way that felt restrained but clear. She wanted Amy to be sure. Not swept up in relief. Not chasing stability out of fear. Sure, that hesitation isn't unusual in families navigating second marriages. According to relationship researchers cited in national media coverage over the years, rebound relationships can sometimes feel intensely stabilizing because they provide immediate emotional support after upheaval. But long-term compatibility requires more than shared relief. Tammy didn't accuse. She didn't attack. She questioned the pace. And that nuance made the tension linger long after the ceremony ended. The ceremony itself, a study in contrast. Amy appeared radiant, hopeful, and visibly emotional as she prepared to walk down the aisle. Friends and relatives gathered, offering encouragement and reassurance. There were smiles, laughter, and moments of genuine warmth. But woven through the celebration was an undercurrent, a sense that this wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement. Amy has always wanted stability. From the earliest episodes of 1,000 Pounds, Sisters, she spoke about building a family, creating a home, giving her children a life that felt secure. Her first marriage was part of that dream. Its unraveling was painful to watch. So this ceremony carried symbolic weight. It wasn't simply about love. It was about redemption. Proof that heartbreak doesn't have the final word. When Tammy took her seat, cameras captured her watching closely. Not cold. Not angry. Observing. The vows were exchanged. Applause filled the room. There were hugs. There were tears. But viewers couldn't shake the question. Was this a joyful new beginning, or a chapter written too quickly? Expert view. Sibling protection or control. Family therapists often distinguish between protective concern and covert control. The line can blur, especially in relationships with long histories of codependency. In media interviews unrelated to this specific show, psychologists have explained that siblings who grow up in unstable environments sometimes develop heightened vigilance toward change. They scan for risk. They anticipate worst-case scenarios. It's not always mistrust. Sometimes it's survival instinct. Tammy has experienced chaotic relationships in her own life, some of which played out publicly. She has acknowledged past mistakes and the emotional toll they took. It would be reasonable, from a human standpoint, for her to apply those lessons when evaluating Amy's choices. But viewers are divided on interpretation. Is Tammy projecting her own regrets? Or has she gained clarity that Amy might benefit from hearing? That debate fueled online conversation almost immediately. Social media, Team Tammy versus Team Amy. Within hours of the episode airing, social platforms lit up. Some fans applauded Tammy's maturity, calling her growth the most impressive arc in reality TV. Others felt her hesitation cast a shadow over a day meant for celebration. Clips of her facial expressions circulated widely. Commentary dissected micro-reactions, a raised eyebrow, a delayed smile. In the age of pause and zoom analysis, nothing goes unnoticed. Meanwhile, Amy's supporters emphasized her right to happiness. They argued that healing timelines are personal and that outsiders, even siblings, don't fully understand the dynamics of a marriage. Hashtags connected to 1,000 pounds. Sisters trended regionally. Reaction videos multiplied. Podcasts weighed in. And the division wasn't hostile. It was emotional. Because fans feel invested. They've watched hospital scares, pregnancy milestones, arguments in cramped living rooms, and tearful confessions. They don't see Amy and Tammy as distant celebrities. They see them as family. What producers may be building toward. Reality television is storytelling, but it's rooted in real lives. Producers shape arcs, but they don't manufacture entire personalities. If this wedding marks a narrative pivot, the tension surrounding Tammy's arrival may signal a broader shift in season dynamics. Will Tammy step into a voice of reason role? Will Amy push back against perceived judgment? Will Brian integrate smoothly or struggle under scrutiny? Sustainable series longevity depends on evolution. Audiences tire of repetitive conflict. They crave transformation. Tammy's restraint suggests producers may lean into themes of maturity and recalibrated sisterhood. But tension, even subtle tension, keeps viewers watching. And that silence at the wedding? It was louder than any argument, the human heart of it all. Strip away the cameras. Remove the editing. Forget the hashtags. At the center of this story are two women in Kentucky who grew up with very little, who faced public ridicule for their bodies, who nearly lost each other to health crises, and who are still figuring life out in real time. Amy wants stability for her children. Tammy wants her sister safe. Those goals aren't opposites, but sometimes they collide in complicated ways. When Tammy arrived at that wedding, she carried years of shared history into the room. Hospital beds, fights over food, tears about independence, moments of resentment, moments of fierce loyalty. She also carried something new, perspective. Whether that perspective proves accurate, only time will tell. But the tension wasn't about drama. It was about love expressed imperfectly. And here's the question no one can answer yet. Is this wedding the beginning of Amy's most stable chapter, or the calm before another storm? That uncertainty is what keeps audiences leaning forward. Because if the past has taught us anything, it's that transformation doesn't erase complexity. It just reframes it. If you've been following this family from the very beginning of 1,000 pounds, sisters, you know one thing for certain. The Slaton story never unfolds in straight lines. And in part 3, we'll examine something even deeper. How Tammy's own romantic history may be shaping her reaction, and whether Amy is repeating patterns neither sister has fully escaped. Before anyone can fully understand Tammy's reaction at Amy and Brian's wedding, we have to confront a difficult truth. Tammy's concern may not be rooted in jealousy, resentment, or control. It may be rooted in experience. Because Tammy Slaton has lived through romantic chaos in front of millions of viewers and nearly paid for it with her life. When 1,000 pounds, sisters first introduced audiences to Tammy, her struggles weren't limited to weight. They extended into a series of online relationships that drew widespread criticism. Viewers watched as she became emotionally invested in men she had never met in person, some of whom openly stated preferences for larger women. Critics accused those partners of fetishizing her size. Tammy defended them fiercely at the time. But as her health deteriorated, culminating in hospitalizations and, eventually, a medically induced coma in late 2022 due to respiratory failure. The cost of instability became undeniable. According to documented reporting and the show's own coverage, Tammy required a tracheostomy and intensive medical intervention. Doctors warned her family about the severity of her condition. The moment was sobering not just for viewers, but for Tammy herself. She later entered a long-term rehabilitation facility focused on food addiction and weight management. During that period, she lost significant weight and ultimately qualified for bariatric surgery. When she returned home, fans saw a visibly transformed woman, not just physically smaller, but emotionally steadier. That transformation didn't happen in isolation. It came after brushes with mortality, failed relationships, public humiliation, and years of internal struggle. So when Tammy looks at Amy stepping into a second marriage relatively quickly after a divorce, she isn't speaking from theory. She's speaking from lived chaos. The speed of love, or the fear of being alone. One of the central questions swirling around Amy's wedding isn't about Brian's character, because there is no verified reporting suggesting wrongdoing, but about timing. How long does it take to heal from a divorce? There is no universal answer. Mental health experts often note that recovery from the end of a marriage can vary widely depending on the circumstances, the duration of the relationship, the presence of children, the emotional intensity of the split. Amy's separation from Michael Halterman was publicly confirmed in 2023 through court filings. The breakdown of the marriage appeared emotionally difficult, with custody considerations adding complexity. To some viewers, a remarriage within a relatively short window raises eyebrows. Not accusations, eyebrows. Tammy's hesitation seemed to echo that sentiment. In private interview segments, she didn't attack Brian. She didn't label him negatively. Instead, she questioned whether Amy had taken enough time to process the emotional aftermath of her first marriage. And that question carries weight. Because Tammy herself once appeared to rush headfirst into romantic attachments without fully evaluating their stability. In hindsight, many of those relationships were deeply unhealthy. Is she projecting? Possibly. Is she drawing from hard-earned wisdom? Also possible. Human motives are rarely singular. A shift in power between sisters. There's another layer here that deserves attention, and it has less to do with Brian and more to do with identity. For years, Amy was the caretaker. In early seasons of 1,000 Pounds, Sisters, she helped Tammy with mobility, appointments, daily tasks. She pushed for healthier habits. She often appeared frustrated but committed. Tammy was framed as dependent. That dynamic shaped how audiences perceived them. Amy was the strong one. Tammy was the struggling one. But post-rehab, the roles have subtly evolved. Tammy's weight loss journey and increased independence shifted the emotional balance. She appears more self-aware, more cautious, more measured. Meanwhile, Amy has experienced public marital breakdown, parenting stress, and emotional volatility on screen. The sister once viewed as unstable has found footing. The sister once viewed as grounded is rebuilding. That reversal can be disorienting, not only for viewers, but for the sisters themselves. When Tammy arrives at Amy's wedding with a composed but concerned demeanor, it signals something profound. She sees herself differently now. And she sees Amy differently too. She's no longer asking, "Will you leave me?" She's asking, "Are you sure this won't hurt you?" That's growth, even if it feels uncomfortable. The wedding through a different lens. Rewatch the footage with this context in mind. Tammy doesn't appear angry. She doesn't appear jealous. She appears vigilant. When Amy beams in her wedding dress, Tammy smiles, but studies the room. When Brian speaks, Tammy listens carefully. It's subtle, almost parental. And that's where online discourse splits. Some viewers interpret her posture as judgment. Others see protective instinct. In families shaped by hardship, protective instinct